Mainstream media are petrified of Restore Britain. This was written in the Financial Times before Restore won all the seats that they stood in at last week's local elections down in Great Yarmouth. But I do love that how all of these pieces read like the smiling Giga Chad and the frightened Wojak, because every time that they just list off something Rupert has said to try and turn him into a bogeyman, it just reads like an endorsement. Restore Britain, the far-right party trying to outflank Nigel Farage. I mean, admittedly, it's not that hard when Nigel Farage keeps denouncing all the policies that his own voters want. For Farage, being attacked on social media is nothing new. In recent weeks, however, some of the attacks have been different. Farage and Reform have been criticised on X not for being too far to the right, but not being right-wing enough. This week, several online commentators, hello, it's me, leapt on a video of Reform's Muslim mayoral candidate Leda Cunningham walking around London with ethnic minority supporters, Indians, some of whom spoke a foreign language, posting comments like Reform UK is getting browner and is anyone still pretending Reform are against immigration? I think that was Basil's caption, so you've made it. These far-right critics, sorry, I don't care what you call me, I just don't want to be governed by foreigners, and I don't think you should be campaigning in any language other than English if you're in England. We can maybe make a pass for the Celtic nations, but it's not an unreasonable demand to just want to be governed by your own people, in your own interests, in your own language. Like, I note that you're not writing this in Hindi, Financial Times, because you actually want people to read it, and so I would encourage Reform, if they want their own voters to listen to their campaign message, maybe speak the language that your own voters are speaking. Anyway, they're saying that these critics are supporters of Restore Britain, a party launched earlier this year by ex-Reform MP Rupert Lowe. Restore is endorsed by Elon Musk and is now polling at around 3% in the UK, according to YouGov. That's when it isn't prompted. When it is prompted, it's between 7 to 9% in Find Out Now polling. And the YouGov and Find Out Now polling is pretty consistent for numbers for Reform's vote share, and that number actually showed up in last week's local elections. It's dipped a little bit from 2025. So it seems pretty realistic that when prompted, Restore Britain are on about 7%, because that's about 5% to 7% of Reform voters who dropped off because they took in too many Tory defectors, and it's representative of a number of people who haven't voted in the last few elections, weren't going to vote until Restore Britain came along, who have been showing up to branch meetings with that exact story. The same thing happened in Great Yarmouth, where the vote turnout was massive, and it was among people who usually didn't vote and told canvassers on the doorstep, I don't vote, I don't really believe in what politicians say, they're all the same, they break their promises, but I trust Rupert because he's delivered for my area, and he seems outside the system, this is a new party, so I'll give them a go. So, actually it seems like 7 to 9% is a bit more realistic. Restore is seeking to outdo Farage in anti-immigrant rhetoric. In doing so, it is embracing a form of hardline nativism, which has rarely been seen in British politics since the de facto disappearance of the British National Party. The BNP weren't credible because they were led by people who had antisocial personality temperaments. You had a bunch of people in there doing the optics disasters of throwing Romans and making apologia for Adolf Hitler, and of course they were sabotaged by MI5. I mean, this has been admitted now, as were the National Front, as was attempted with UKIP and the Referendum Party, who aren't even, extreme far-right parties, despite being labelled as such. But were the BNP correct about the consequence of mass migration? Yes. Were they correct about the grooming gangs? To the extent to where, Channel 4 buried a documentary on Bradford admitting the problem because they were afraid it would be a boon to the BNP's campaign in 2003-2004. Yeah, they were. And so, if action had been taken on the issue when the BNP were raising concerns about it, then we wouldn't be in the situation we're here today. So just saying, oh, you're like the BNP, woo, sorry, that scaremongering just doesn't work anymore because the problems are too in our face, they're too severe, too many people have suffered to worry less about solving the problem than we are about being called mean names by the Financial Times. The very same paper, by the way, on whose behalf Boris Johnson conducted the Boriswave, because remember, Dominic Cummings said, Boris Johnson opened the floodgates to make the Financial Times like him again. And it's because the Financial Times are in the pocket of big business, and big business like cheap foreign labour to depress the wages of working people, to drive down the costs of doing business. And also, Boris wanted raw bodies to soak up all the inflation that had been generated through his COVID stimulus, and so he engaged in human quantitative easing at the request of Conservative Party donors, lobbyists, and the FT. So if the Financial Times don't like you, that's a badge of endorsement. And they quote my friend Charlie Downs here, saying, Reform UK believe anyone from anywhere can become British. Restore Britain believe that Britain is a people defined by indigenous British ancestry and Christian faith. Correct. In English council elections on Thursday, Reform faced its first test of support, and speaking in past tense because they smashed it, and it was proof that the Restore Britain ground game works. Lowe, labelled Britain's most extreme MP by campaign group Hope Not Hate, has said he aims to create a national party and stand hundreds of candidates at the next election. They're terrified because Restore converted its online support into in-world canvassers and swept the local elections where it stood candidates. And so the ground game has been proven to be effective, so they can be a viable challenge in by-elections, and who knows, the general election down the line, whether it's this coming one or one after. And it's curious, the Financial Times has to run to communist activists at Hope Not Hate, who helped cover up the grooming gangs for ages because they called anyone speaking out about it far-right and racist, including Charlene Downs' mother, the young girl who went missing and was definitely abused by a grooming gang, and, 2 men were let off because the police mishandled the evidence during the trial, but they seem to have bragged about hiding her body by mincing it into kebab meat and putting it into the grouting of the tiles of the kebab shop. They decided to call Charlene Downs' mother far-right for talking to Nick Griffin of the BNP because nobody else would listen. Like, okay, Hope Not Hate, why did you not dedicate your substantial state-funded resources to helping this mother find her missing child and stop the worst child abuse scandal in British history? No, you sat there calling everyone racist who wanted to do anything about it instead. Well, actually, I think Hope Not Hate are actually the villains of this story rather than Rupert Lowe. Rupert is unabashed about his nativist views, a highly unusual stance for a sitting parliamentarian in Britain. Yeah. No MP has represented the majority sentiment of the British public, who just want possession of their own country and don't want to be rendered demographically obsolete by policies like mass migration, which they voted against in every election since 1974. Funny that. Countless foreign men from cultures and religions which treat women like shit are now roaming our streets, whether they arrived here legally or illegally, he said on X last week in a characteristic post. Afghans, Somalians, Albanians, Sudanese, Pakistanis, Eritreans. The importation list goes on. They drink, they loiter, they spit, they intimidate, they harass, he added, and all will be banned, along with India, on a red list for immigration, legal and illegal, of course, by Restore Britain. In March, Restore claimed it surpassed 123,000 members, I think it's up to like 135,000 now, and claimed it had overtaken the Conservatives, though it did not provide evidence. The Tories do not publish their membership figures either. Well, as far as I understand, they're legitimate. And Reform's membership ticker has been taken off its website, and people have said it's almost impossible to cancel, so we actually don't know Reform's membership figures, and I'd be interested to see how many traded in their Reform membership for Restore. I think it would be good for all parties to actually do a public audit of their membership figures, like Reform actually did with Sky News back when Kemi Badenoch said it was late 2024 that their membership numbers were inflated and not real, when it turns out, they were. X has been instrumental in helping the party gain reach. Lowe has over 750,000 followers, while Restore has 350,000, far outstripping their support on TikTok and Instagram. It's because they put out substantive messaging, and that plays well on text-based platforms. But of course, they have their supporters on image-based platforms like TikTok. Well, lots of them are banned for some conspicuous reason, but also Instagram and YouTube. And again, my friends run the party. I'm in the business of encouraging 1,000 flowers to bloom on the right, and I think that we need a movement with integrity and good men leading it. So of course, I'm gonna cheer this on for as long as it stays the course and does what we like. Both Lowe and Musk have focused on the scourge of grooming gangs, particularly the role of perpetrators from migrant communities, Pakistani Muslims. Yeah, weird how you don't name that. Lowe has linked the scandal explicitly to the importation of foreign men from specific cultures. Well, yes, because if they weren't here, the crimes wouldn't have been committed. Why are you more worried about pointing out the culprits of the crimes and the implications that might follow from there on, noticing differences between groups and how they behave, and particularly one group's unreciprocated animosity against the other, and therefore the policy implications that might follow from that, not wanting to live alongside this group that tortures, abducts, and abuses children, and in Charlene Downs' case, and Victoria Gogliger, and a handful of other girls, murders them. Why would you care more about the reputations of these perpetrator communities than just naming the problem? And you have to name the problem to solve it. So why would you care more about the reputation of these communities than solving the problem, Financial Times? Very conspicuous. Lowe disputes criticism of Restore as racist or bigoted, insisting it's the common sense party. In response to a request for comment, he said, "I am entirely uninterested in what the Financial Times, Reform or Hope Not Hate think of me. I do not care." And that's why I like him. What's interesting here is the experts that then go to cite right at the bottom. They go to Luke Trill, who is the director of More in Common, and he said that his think tank suggested that 6% of the public harboured hardline, nativist and racist views. Okay, well, Restore doesn't, so that's fine then. In focus groups, some reform-curious voters complained that Farage has become too establishment, while Lowe, by contrast, appeared to be the real deal. And that's when public recognition of Rupert is admittedly still quite low, so he has the opportunity to make a really good first impression. Trill stressed Restore did not appear a huge threat to reform, but it could impact Farage's party in two key ways. First, many seats could be decided on tiny margins at the next election, and so Restore could block them from getting them, and I know for a fact that after Restore Britain won all those seats in Great Yarmouth, well, Reform are much more concerned about their performance nationally. Let's put it that way. And secondly, Restore's outsized influence on social media could tempt some in Reform to shift rightward. And this is just a net good effect for everybody. Because if Reform do still end up being the party of government in the next election, or make their planned pact with the Conservatives, as is dreaded, and so they will have a softening leftward force in government, influencing them to water down their policy offering, well, between now and the next election, it's actually good to force Reform to be more stalwart and courageous, because if Reform do win government, we're all still living here, right? And so we want them to be effective. And so if Restore ends up being still a pressure campaign on Reform, which is what was basically originally intended as a movement before they became a party, and they become a party, they win a few seats, but ultimately Reform still winning government, then Reform enacting Restore's agenda is to the benefit of the rest of the country. So there are no downsides here. The only downside is, of course, to Sundar Katwala, again, a former prominent member of the Fabian Society, whose logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing, who is, I think, of Indian and Irish heritage. So, Irish, partly, native British Isles, but clearly doesn't have much loyalty to this country and constantly complains about anything that resembles a hard boundary around who can be considered British, because he would, of course, be excluded from that because he's not just because he's half Indian, but because he's a horrible traitor and a really subversive person. He says, the significance of Restore goes beyond political tactics and its impact on reform. He wrote in The New World, some leftist rag, in March, the real threat of this new political racism is to the social norms of our society. That is what must be resisted. Actually, no, Sundar, I think you're the extremist here, because you just want to open Britain's borders, flood it with whoever, and then declare everyone who sets foot on our soil British, no matter what that does to our cultural continuity, no matter the crimes that amount, the costs imposed on the taxpayer. You just seem really vindictive and petty and engaged in the politics of reputation destruction, and you're entirely astroturf, by the way, because British Future, which is what you've called yourself, it gets funding from the charity via permissions from the Charity Commission. But you don't have any organic reach. Nobody watches your diminutive little podcasts or reads your ridiculous little papers. Nobody cares. This is just you quaking with fear because you realise that your politics has no organic constituency, but Rupert's message resonates. And so you don't just get a free pass to inflict a socialist revolution that none of us wanted on us anymore. This is us saying, no, we've had enough. And the most hilarious article was the Daily Mirror, who was swanning about in Great Yarmouth. They actually went and interviewed an Iranian heritage barber who wants the English to engage in the Raise the Colours, put up the Union Jack and English flag campaign, and actually had an argument with a guy who was running around in a balaclava, taking them down. He puts Union Jacks on all of his barber, what they call the things that you wear to stop the hair from getting on you. It seems that they found the one barber in the country, besides the one that I go to, that is a legitimate business, not run by Kurdish drug gangs. And so, you know what? Fair enough. Nice guy. You can stay, buddy. But they then go on and they whinge about all the people that are likely to vote Great Yarmouth first. They run across a couple walking their dog along the promenade who say they're going to vote Conservative. I assume it's a gay couple, therefore. But the best line in all of this is, Lowe's party makes Nigel Farage look like Zack Polanski. I think Restore Britain should just print that on their website under an endorsements tab, alongside the Alistair Campbell quote where Alistair said he met Rupert Lowe in the 90s and he was the most right-wing man he'd ever encountered. So the establishment is clearly petrified of Restore Britain, and that means that Rupert is doing something right. And so the interplay between Reform as a national party and Restore as an insurgent right-wing movement who don't have all the self-inflicted wounds of reform with the Tory defectors and denouncing mass deportations, the dynamic between the two will be interesting to watch play out in the years going forward. But I just have to say, in the aftermath of the local elections, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic. You know, Restore had a clean sweep where they stood. Reform's largely patriotic candidates won, even if they've ousted the guy that made the joke about Nigerians and potholes. Heaven forbid a guy crack a joke, right? Otherwise, most of their patriotic candidates won, their dodgy foreign national candidates lost, and so things seem to be trending in the right direction between now and the next election, while the Lib Dems, Conservatives, Labour and the Greens seem to be falling apart, because they're led by disreputable reprobates who all have it out for each other. And so things seem to be going pretty well. It's rare you get some optimism from me, but any time that hope not hate lose their rag over something, this is a lesson that Reform should learn, just respond as Rupert does. Smile and say, I don't care. Just as I finished filming, Rupert shared this. It's a piece written up in the Sunday Times over the last week, and it's a profile on Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain after the victory in Great Yarmouth. And there's an interesting quote in here. It says, "What is his appeal? Lowe is praised by MAGA for having a consistent hardline message on deportations, saying every single illegal immigrant in the UK must go. One administration figure said, it looks like Farage has gone mainstream, whereas Rupert is the real deal." Sorry, but this is proof of what I've been saying for a long time. It's that Nigel Farage only adopted mass deportations because Donald Trump sent a clear message through multiple intermediaries that he was disappointed that Farage had denounced mass deportations to Stephen Edgington and had said, it's a shame he's not the guy. This is why Seb Gorka on election night, when speaking to me on the Lotus Eaters, said, why has Nigel cucked? I'm going to go talk to him. I have heard rumblings from within the Trump administration. For our guys, the people that aren't happy about the Iran war and the distraction away from the deportations agenda, trying to get the administration back on track before the midterms in 2028. I've heard from our guys they were excited about Rupert's launch video and that they back Rupert over Reform. And that's because he has a clear and consistent and credible message, whereas Reform are unreliable allies who have set their face against the platform that Trump won on in 2024 and is what quite a few Trump supporters would like to see the administration get back to doing. So it seems that Rupert and Restore have momentum. Our allies across the pond recognise it, and more importantly, the domestic press are terrified of the prospect of Restore Britain.